Today we're going to do a brief showcase on the Grundfos JP series. This pump is a little centrifugal pump. It's self-priming, as you can see by the large chamber here. It's a jet pump or shallow well pump. It's designed to be able to draw fluid from below it, say 20 to 25 feet or more, which we'll get into with the adductor. It's designed to give a moderate amount of flow at a moderate amount of pressure, say 30 to 50 psi. You'll see the box it came in is labeled. You want to double check to make sure that what's on the box is what's in the pump as well, and we'll get to the pump nameplate in a moment. But here's the box label. It's a JP for jet pump. 0.5 is the horsepower, 1/2. D is the series, not really relevant. It just depends on when it was made, whether it'll be a DE, etc. And CI for cast iron. You'll see it's dual rated single phase, 115, 230 volt. Again, we see the 1/2 horsepower, the weight. Down here is the date code. This is important because it shows us where it was made, and it tells us when it was made. Year 2015, week 10, made in Italy. Down here below that is the 8-digit Grundfos part number. And you can use that to find more information on it on the web or if you're talking to somebody about the pump. If we go back to the pump itself, you'll see on the top technical plate here, for the terminal, we have the actual nameplate on the pump. And it's going to mirror much the same information. Again, you've got your model listed, your voltage and amperage, part number at the very top there, speed, hertz, and again down here that N1 P51510, that's more or less the serial number or date code. With the Grundfos pump you have a 2-year warranty, and that's 2 years and 6 months technically, because you get 2 years from the date of manufacture, 2.5 years from the date of manufacture, or 2 years from the date of installation, whichever comes first. So looking a little further, you'll see on the label here, it tells us on the electrical end, this one's already got 230 volt wired. And there's a sticker also showing just your basic warnings and such. One nice little feature on this pump, if you look at the motor fan cover on the back here, you can see that there's actually an arrow pointing the direction of rotation. So if you're bumping this and you're trying to watch the fan, which is a little hard to see as dark as it is in here, but if you're trying to make sure the fan's going the right direction, you can actually see the arrow right there. There's no question of, do I have the right direction that I need to be looking for? If for some reason, say you got this pump, it's got 230 wired currently, you wanted to use it at 115 volt, what you need to do is remove this cover. Now, I've already gone about and taken off the screws, but you take the cover off, and inside here is this little block. You can see it right here. And this block is what changes the voltage between 230 and 115. And you want to have the side with the voltage you want pointed towards this little clip here that holds it in place. So if you see on the other side here, it says 115. On this side, you won't be able to see it because it's installed, but it says 230 on there. And we'll see if we can pry it out of there. Right, so I've pried it out, and now you can see the side that's facing in towards this clip here has got the 230 marked on it and a little arrow, and on the other side's a 115. So if I wanted to change it from 230, I'd change it so it's facing, if I want to change from 230 to 115, I'd simply flip it around and reinstall it. So now if I insert it, we'd be having 115. If you also look very carefully, you can see right down here, there's arrows on the white plastic. There's also a little black arrow right here to make sure that you line that up with the little arrow on our piece. And it slots in there fairly simply. So I'll replace the cover. Remaining electrical, we have a square deep pressure sensor, our pressure switch, and you can see on the front of this cover, it's going to show what your range is based on what model you have. And then if you open this up and look inside, you've actually got your wiring diagram for your incoming power right there inside of it. And you can see we've got the terminals here, the grounding point. Inside there you've got 2 springs. And you can see these 2 springs are what determine your on-off pressure. And the big spring is for off pressure only. In order to adjust it, you take a 3/8 inch wrench, and for every full rotation around clockwise, it's going to add 2.5 psi to the shutoff pressure for the large one. For the small one, for every turn clockwise, it adds 2.5 psi to both the cut on and the cut off. So you want to adjust this first one so that you've got your on set to the point you want to have, and then adjust the off upwards from here. If you're doing adjustments on this and it's not quite right, 2.5 psi is what they say in the book. It may be 2.45. Play with it a little bit. If the pressure's not cutting out right at 50 psi as you expect it to, try adjusting it slightly. Small adjustments, test and try. Beyond that, we said that this is a cast iron pump. As you can see, it's got a cast iron housing. You've got a mounting foot right down here. One point here, one point on the other side. You want to make sure that's secured to something that's not going to move. And then as far as what you've got for ports, you've got your standard top discharge. You've got your front suction. And then down here you have a drain port. And up top, you have a fill port or priming port. If you want to prime it to try to pull air out of it, you can release it here. Now, one thing I want to point out on these ports is if you look at these plugs, you'll see that they're actually just plastic plugs. Now, the casing's cast iron, mind you, but this is plastic with an O-ring to seal it. So if you're taking these out and putting them back in, you want to be careful that you don't cross-thread them because it's very easy to cross-thread plastic and the metal. And then down here, what we have is what they call the nozzle. Keep in mind that this is the suction, this is the nozzle, and we'll get back to that with the adductor in a moment. Let me bring the adductor out here to show you what we're talking about. This is the adductor that Grundfos offers, and it's not standard with the pump. It's something you have to buy separately. You can see it's a piece of piping with a little nozzle sticking into it. And what this is for is if you have a suction lift of, say, over 20 feet or more, because physically any self-priming pump is limited to about 20-25 feet. So in the event that you were going to, say, pull 30 or 40 feet of lift, you need something to get that liquid the rest of the way up. So the way this device works is you'd plumb this into your system, this down here being the bottom of your suction, and this being the top of your suction coming up towards the pump. And what this connects to right here is this nozzle. So what you'd want to do is you're going to actually end up with two different pipes. You're going to have piping that covers this, goes all the way up, and whatever piping you need to have below it. Plus, I recommend having a check valve in there that allows you to keep fluid in the suction line at all times. And then what you do is you take the nozzle and you plumb that to this point right here. And if you look, what this does is now you have positive pressure coming from the pump being forced down and into this inducer or eductor. And so the liquid is forced into here, and then what it does is it goes through here and pushes up with the flow that's coming down here as well. So basically it's boosting itself. And you can kind of see by looking inside here, maybe it's too dark. But you can see flow would go through there, combined with the positive flow through here, and that's going to cause to actually pull liquid deeper than where this point is. Last but not least, regarding the discharge piping and the suction piping as well, same with any pump really, you want to make sure that you don't have too much pressure on the pump. That is to say, if you have a 20-foot discharge coming out of here, and it's all sitting directly up on top of it, well, that might create a situation where you have, let's say, 20 pounds or 200 pounds, 300 pounds of weight. If you have all that weight pressing down on the pump, it's going to press down on this casing, and one of two things is going to happen. Either the pump's going to tip forward like this because it's going to knock itself off of the bolts holding it in place. Or worse yet, if it doesn't do that and the bolts hold, you're going to put pressure on this point of the casing right here, and the casing's going to want to go forward, and you might end up getting your shaft bent inside there. Once the shaft is bent, the whole pump will tear itself to bits. Regarding the suction piping, kind of the same thing. You want to make sure you have a straight run coming out, and on that straight run you want to make sure it's on an angle, and you don't want it to be angled up and in. You want it to be coming from down and up, and it doesn't have to be very pronounced. A few degrees is all it takes really, but the point of it is to make sure that the water's coming up and into it. That way if air gets into the plumbing, it's going to be forced up and into the pump and out. Whereas if you have your piping up here above the pump, if air gets trapped up here, you're going to get an air bubble, and you might end up starving the pump because air locks up here, can't get to the pump because it's going to try to rise well as the water's going to go down. Whereas when you're down here, the air has no choice but to go up and through. And again, that's a general recommendation for pretty much any centrifugal pump. Lastly, this pump does come with a manual. The manual has most everything I've just talked about inside there, and you'll find that in the box with the pump. If that doesn't give you enough information, because it's not going to have things like performance and that sort of thing, you can get a product guide for this. Otherwise, if you find this number again, 97855-072, that's the part number for the pump, you can take that number, go to Grundfos.com, find their selection software on there called WebCaps, and that'll allow you to bring up data sheets for the pump. Lastly, if you have any questions, you can always call us or you can call Grundfos. Hopefully this is helpful.